Hi everyone, my name is Marti Szabadi-Juhasz. I am one of the fitness and sports instructors at 15 Wing Moose Jaw. So today I am going to talk about how to build up your workout to get a basic knowledge of the most important components when you plan your session. So in the next half an hour we will discuss training planning, periodization, volume and intensity, choosing exercises, sets, reps, rest time, and different loading patterns that we can use. I will show you some examples and findings of the latest researches. This is essential for achieving long-range goals along your fitness journey, preparing for your competition, increasing your physical fitness level, or even if you prepare for your force evaluation. But first of all, let's talk about what you need to achieve long-range athletic or fitness goals. So, an organized and well-planned training program is a requirement for maximizing strength improvement. Usually, the primary objective of training is reaching peak performance at a specific time. One of our keywords here is periodization. Periodization has two basic components. The first one is the time or training phases, which can be an annual plan, for example, for a competition. That means how the year is divided into various training phases. But if you have just minor goals like reconditioning after an injury or illness, you can set up a shorter phase like monthly or even weekly plan. The second component is the periodization of strength to maximize its effectiveness. It's about deciding what kind of training adaptation will lead to the greatest improvements. So, as you can see, designing a training program requires athletes and everybody to understand many interconnected concepts. Awareness of how training volume, load, or intensity affect a program is very, very important. It's also essential to understand what factors will determine loading patterns. Let's see them now. So these factors are the number of repetitions, number of sets, and the order of exercises. Rest is also a vital component. Those athletes, lifters, bodybuilders who wish to design their own training program, need to understand all of these training elements. So, training volume. Training volume becomes more important as athletes approach high performance. This is the quality of work performed and incorporates the following integral parts: the time or duration of training, the total amount of weight lifted per training session or phase, the number of exercises per training session, the number of sets and repetitions per exercise or training session. It is recommended to maintain training logs to monitor the total volume of work performed and help planning it for future weeks and months. Workout booklet, notebook, phone or app in your phone are some ways to do this. Training volume varies among individuals according to their training background, work tolerance and biological makeup. We can talk about high volume training, which is planned during the muscle definition phase in order to burn more fat and develop better muscle striations. However, it can also be negative because increases can result in high levels in fatigue. This is another reason why a well-designed progressive plan is crucial. Medium volume training, on the other hand, is typical for maximum strength or power training. As athletes adapt to higher volume of training, they experience better recovery between sets and training sessions. This results in more work per training session and per week, making further volume increases possible. Next big factor: intensity or load of training. To understand intensity, first, let's talk about 1 rep max. 1 repetition maximum is the maximum amount of weight that a person can possibly lift for 1 repetition. It can also be used as an upper limit. So in strength training, intensity or load is expressed as a percentage of 1 rep max. Super maximum is a load that actually exceeds one's maximum strength. It's used by professionals with spotters to assist. Most other athletes should be restricted to load of no more than 100%, You can see this in the table, and also that the maximum load is from 90 to 100% of maximum, and the heavy is from 80 to 90%, and the medium is from 50 to 80%, and the low is from 30 to 50% of 1 rep max. The load will not be the same through all training phases. On the contrary, periodization will alter the load according to the goals of each training phase. Okay, so number of exercises. The key to an effective program is proper exercise selection. We all know it's often difficult to establish an optimum number of exercises. The number and type of exercises must be selected according to the following factors. First one is the age and performance level. One of the main objectives of a training program for juniors or beginner athletes is developing solid foundation. For this, many exercises should be selected that address the primary muscle groups. Such a program may last 2 to 3 years depending on age and the expected time to achieve high performance. When it comes to performances, usually the main training objective is to reach the highest possible level of performance. The strength programs, especially if we are talking about during the competitive phase, must be specific, which means only a few exercises directed at the prime movers. Next factor, needs of the sport. So programs should be adapted to address individual specific needs by giving priority to those exercises that stress the underdeveloped parts of the body. For example, a high jumper may perform only 3 to 4 exercises to strengthen all prime movers, but a football player may have to perform 6 to 9 exercises to accomplish the same goal, right? Phase of training, the next factor. Let's see an example for that. So a football, hockey, basketball or volleyball player will perform some 9 to 10 exercises during the preparing phase and only 3 to 5 during the league season to maintain performance. Order of exercises. So in general, exercises should alternate between limbs and muscle groups to ensure better recovery. The following order is suggested: legs, arms, abdomen, legs, arms, back, and so on. But strength training books a different order: large muscle group first, and then small muscle groups. And a different one for athletes, because they have 2 options to perform from the top down, which is the vertical sequence, and it provides better recovery for the muscles. By the time exercise number 1 is performed again, the muscles have recovered. Second, the athlete may perform all the sets for exercise 1, then move to the next exercise. That's the horizontal sequence. This sequence may cause local fatigue so great that by the time all the sets are performed, hypertrophy is resulted, which refers to an increase in muscle size, instead of improving maximum strength. Therefore, the vertical sequence is more beneficial because it allows a longer rest interval between sets and a better regeneration. Number of reps. So, both the number of repetitions and the speed of execution are functions of load. The higher the load, the fewer the repetitions, and the more slowly they are performed. Strength trainers and bodybuilders who follow traditional thinking about the number of repetitions will be shocked by the numbers here, right? Very few people have thought of performing 150 rep sets. But yes, you can see it is possible because each training phase is different and requires a separate approaching of loading, rest interval, number of reps, and exercise order. For development of maximum strength, the number of repetitions is very low. To develop power, which means how quickly you can exert force, the number of repetitions is moderate. But for muscular endurance of short duration, 10 to 30 repetitions will work, but of medium duration, around 30 to 60 repetitions non-stop, and of long duration requires higher numbers of repetition. Sometimes up to one's limit or more than 100 or 150 reps. Number of sets. So set is a number of repetition per exercise followed by a rest interval. The number of sets depends on several factors, including how many exercises the athlete performs in a training session, the phase of training, how many muscle groups the athlete wants to train, and how experienced the bodybuilder or strength trainer is. Now we're going to talk a little more about strength training. So we already know that more volume leads to more growth. For example, this graph shows that as you increase the number of sets performed per exercise, muscle growth increases as well. In fact, comparing 4 to 6 sets to a single set, you would experience around 80–85% more growth. So based on this alone, we would think that the more volume is better. In fact, many would now assume that performing 5 sets for all the exercises in our workouts or just doing as much as possible would be optimal for growth. But upon further analysis, we realized that this isn't the case. More is not necessarily better. This is because there actually seems to be an upper limit of sets per muscle group that you can do in a single workout before it starts to do more harm than good. After a deeper analysis, it was found this limit is roughly 10 sets per muscle group. So for example, on your chest day, performing over 10 hard sets dedicated to your chest will likely just begin to provide negative returns and start to impair your recovery. This is something widely known as junk volume. Sets done after this point have little or no positive effect to your gains and simply decrease your ability to recover. Now, of course, this will vary individually. It also depends on the nature of the exercises you perform, and of course, the limit is likely higher for more trained individuals. So, one of the most debated topics within the fitness industry is training frequency. More specifically, how often should you train each muscle group per week? Many state that a training frequency of once per week is best, while others favor a higher frequency approach and believe it to be better in terms of maximizing growth. For example, a recent survey of 127 competitive bodybuilders found that around 69% of respondents trained each more muscle group once per week, while the remaining around 31% train muscles twice or more weekly. So the question now, what is optimal? Luckily for us, researchers collected 10 different studies and compared training each muscle once per week versus higher frequencies of 2 or 3 times per week. The researchers analyzed the effect the different training frequencies had on muscle growth. The result? As shown below, every single study showed a benefit to training with higher frequencies. In fact, training each muscle 2 or 3 times per week resulted in 3.1% greater muscle growth than training each muscle just once per week. But what is too much? So, a well-set-up training program will enable you to avoid doing too many sets for a muscle group in one workout. This will minimize any excess junk volume. To clear up any confusion, let's use a step-by-step example that you can follow. So, we know that roughly 10 to 20 sets per muscle per week is a sweet spot for maximizing growth, with beginners being at the lower end and more experienced lifters being at the higher end of this range. Now let's say you are a fairly experienced lifter requiring 16 sets per muscle per week, using chest as an example. Most popular among bodybuilders, the bro split involves each workout to 1 to 2 muscle group. Rather than using the bro split and hammering all of the 16 sets in one chest workout, it would be better to split the required number of chest sets into at least 2 days per week to be trained with other muscle groups, for example, using something like an upper-lower split. This way, you will be able to perform those 16 sets with better quality since you will be more fresh when performing them. You will remain under the estimated 10 sets per session threshold. and train each muscle at the optimal frequency of twice per week, all leading to better gains and more efficient recovery in the long run. Researchers compared training each muscle group once a week with 16 sets per session or twice a week with 8 sets per session. After 8 weeks, they found that the 8 sets per session group experienced similar but slightly greater muscle growth. They also experienced a greater improvement in training load volume when compared to the 16 sets per session group. And the researchers speculate that these findings would likely reach greater significance if the study was done longer. Now, as for the reasoning behind this, it likely has to do with something called muscle protein synthesis, which is essentially the process your muscle goes through after a workout in order to build additional muscle mass. As we know that after a resistance training workout, protein synthesis remains elevated for roughly 36 to 48 hours in most individuals. So if you were to train each muscle group just once per week, you can see how you wouldn't be optimizing the protein synthesis response by not stimulating the growth process as frequently as you could be. While if you were to train each muscle group too frequently, you would be interfering with the recovery process. So by sticking to training each muscle group 2 or 3 times per week, for example, you are able to maximize the protein synthesis response throughout the week while avoiding any interference with recovery, given that your volume per session isn't excessive. And lastly, just always keep in mind that research tells us about averages. Some people respond better to higher training volumes, whereas some people respond better to lower training volumes. Always listen to your body. Meaning that you will want to use the guidelines shown in the slides as a rough starting point, but you should then be adjusting it over time based on how your body progresses. Rest time. Energy is necessary to complete your workout. High-intensity training might tax one's energy stores to such an extent that he or she becomes depleted. In order to complete your workout, a rest interval has to be taken between each set to refill the depleted fuel stores before the next set is performed. Bodybuilders and strength trainers must realize that the rest time between sets and training sessions are as important as the training itself, and rest interval calculation should include the rest taken between sets and between days of training as well. Okay, rest intervals between sets. When the heart pumps the highest volume of blood to the working muscles, that's during the rest interval and not during the work. A short rest interval reduces the amount of blood reaching the working muscles, and without this supply of fuel and oxygen, you will not have the energy to complete the planned training session. Several factors influence the appropriate duration of the rest interval between sets, including the type of strength, magnitude of the load being employed, the speed of contraction, the number of muscle groups, the level of conditioning, amount of rest taken between training days, and the total weight of the athlete, keeping in mind that heavy athletes with larger muscles usually recover at a slower rate than lighter athletes. Okay, let's see the rest interval between strength training sessions. So the rest interval between strength training sessions depends on the conditioning level and recovery ability of the individual, the training phase, and the energy source used in training. Well-conditioned person always recover faster. Glycogen levels will not return to normal in less than 2 days. If athletes tax the same energy system and fuel during technical and strength training, the next training of this type must be planned for 2 days later, since it takes 48 hours for full restoration of glycogen. If only strength training is performed, the restoration of glycogen occurs faster, 55% in 5 hours and almost 100% in 24 hours. This means that strength training can be planned more frequently. Okay, but what do we do during rest? Most people do nothing during the rest interval to facilitate recovery between sets. There are, however, some things that can be done to enhance the rate of recovery, like relaxation exercises, such as shaking the legs, arms, and shoulders, and getting a light massage. These aid by improving blood circulation within the muscle, but the mental control of muscle relaxation is also very important. And let's see now how long the rest should be. As you can see so far, when it comes to optimizing your training program, there's a lot of variables that need to be considered. On one end of the spectrum, there are those who keep their rest periods as short as possible in order to sweat more, achieve a better pump, and experience more general satisfaction after their workout. On the other end, you have those who take their time with all of their sets and seem to barely break a sweat. But which one is better for muscle growth? Well, let's start by taking a look at the pros and cons for each. So first, 1.5 minutes or less. The main reason why this seems better is due to the increased metabolic stress or the burning sensation that your muscles experience. And since metabolic stress was shown to be one of the main drivers for muscle growth, it makes sense that it would be the better option over longer rest periods. Seems like we found a winner, right? Well, let's see the other option as well, more than 3 minutes. As with many things, short rest periods comes with price, and it's something you have probably experienced yourself as well. With a short rest period, you're not going to be able to lift as heavy or perform as many reps as after a long rest period. This means that with longer rest period, you are able to achieve more total volume in your workout. So as you can see, it's essentially a competition between more total volume with longer rest periods versus more metabolic stress with shorter rest periods. Which one wins? Luckily for us, there is a study in which they took 21 young resistance-trained men and randomly assigned them to two groups. The first group was who performed their resistance training program with 1 minute rest between sets. They were the short rest group, and the other group was with 3 minutes rest between sets. They were the long rest group. After 8 weeks, the long rest period group saw better muscle growth and strength gains than the short period group. So, as it seems, the long rest periods are likely the better option. We know that the long rest might be better, but exactly how long are we talking about? Well, this depends on several factors, but mainly the type of exercise you are performing. For example, researchers found that roughly 2 minutes of rest was enough for single joint exercises like chest flies, while subjects responded best to at least 3 minutes of rest for heavy compound movements like the bench press, overhead press, squat, and so on. And when using very heavy weight for lower reps, like 3 or 5 reps, increasing your rest period to even more than 3 minutes might be the ideal. In fact, in this case, 4 or 5 minutes of rest would likely to be best option for optimal strength gains. While for your isolation exercises and other less taxing movements, sticking to around 2 minutes of rest between sets seems to be the best option. So, for example, this is how you could properly implement rest periods in the following chest and triceps workout. Hopefully this example provides you with some insight as to how to incorporate rest periods into your own routine. Okay, final component, loading patterns. The pyramid is one of the most popular loading patterns in strength training and bodybuilding. The point of this method is that as the load progressively increases to maximum, the number of sets decreases. Another one is the double pyramid, represents two pyramids, one mirroring the other. This is great for athletes improving power and agility. The load increases progressively from the bottom up to the 95% of 1 rep max, and then decreases again for the last sets. The last sets with the loads of 85 and 80% are meant to improve power. The skewered pyramid is an improved variation of the double pyramid. This is also mostly used in sports training. When we are talking about improving speed and quickness, this is an excellent choice. The load constantly increases throughout the session, except during the last set when it is lowered. The purpose of this last set is to provide variation and motivation, since the athlete must perform the set as quickly as possible. As only one set is performed and the number of repetitions is low, exhaustion will not be experienced, so the single set will not trigger gains in hypertrophy. The flat pyramid represents the best loading pattern for achieving maximum strength benefits. In order to produce hypertrophy, the load must range between 60 and 80% of 1 rep max, whereas for maximum strength, the load must be between 80 and 100% of 1 rep max. It keeps the load within one intensity level. This prevents the body from becoming confused by several different intensities. The flat pyramid begins with a warm-up set, which is 60%, and then the load stabilizes for the entire exercise at 70% of 1 rep max. Another set at 60% may be performed at the end of each exercise for variety. So now, at the end, let's see the steps of designing your training program. First of all, set your workout or training goals with a type of strength which can be muscular endurance, power, agile, maximum strength, and so on. So this plan should be phase specific and designed to meet your needs. The next step is selecting the exercises. Identify the prime movers for your goals and then select the exercises that can best stimulate these muscles to meet your needs. For example, if one has the capacity to develop massive legs quickly and the upper body takes longer to grow, then select exercises to compensate the weaker part to encourage growth and restore symmetry. Step 3. Test 1 rep max. Knowing one's 1 rep max for each exercise is crucial in strength training to the concept of periodization and load planning, as each workout is planned using a percentage of 1 rep max. The fourth step is to develop the actual training program. By this point, it is known which exercises are to be performed, the 1 rep maximum for each exercises, and the type of strength to be developed. With this information, you can select the number of exercises, the percentage of 1 rep max, the number of reps, the number of sets, and the desired rest time for each exercise. Finally, if you are starting a new training phase, test to recalculate the 1 rep max. Another test for 1 rep max is needed prior to the beginning of each new phase to ensure that progress is acknowledged and the new loads are based upon the new gains made in strength. Alright, so I hope you have heard and found some useful information in this workshop regarding how to build your workout or training session. For further information in this topic, feel free to check out the following references or ask one of our professionals. Thank you so much for being here today. Stay safe and have a wonderful day. Bye.